So, I kinda hate CGI. Okay, let me walk that back a bit. When I say CGI, I mean the term in all caps. The shake and bake duct tape meets no nail fix for the billion-dollar filmmaking industry. I'm not talking about the skill-heavy field of computer-generated imagery that smartly utilizes tricks, sleight of hand, and the occasional bombast to emphasize what films are good at: telling stories. I'm not talking about David Fincher or anyone like him. I'm using the term CGI to talk about its overuse, its saturation, its domination, the fatty curds to the whey from the udder of Andy Serkis's career.
I'm playing the character of Gollum. Now, the character of Gollum does tend to kind of belong to a lot of different departments, obviously because it's a computer-generated character. But I guess what I'm doing is really providing the acting side of it.
Up until recently, my criticism of CGI was just an aesthetic one. I mourn the death of the real set that had a feeling of weight and substance. It's one of the main reasons why I'm so attracted to the work of Guillermo del Toro, who never, rarely lets CGI subsume the other traditional VFX like makeup, costume and set design. The same is true for older movies like Fifth Element and Hook, which I come back to not just for the nostalgia trip, but for their Disneyland aesthetic, a sense that somewhere in time these places exist. Yes, those films have their own jankiness, but for all the gaudy 90s colour palette, these films look good, even when you see the seams showing. Both Besson and Spielberg have publicly expressed regret about the finished product. Spielberg has been pretty open about how much he didn't enjoy working on and the eventual results of Hook, while Jean-Luc Besson actually wished that he had waited just a little bit longer to better integrate CGI into the movie. Make of that what you will. But for all my subjective criticisms of CGI aesthetically, I think there's a few interconnected reasons why its use is often so jarring, and it's got less to do with quality than actual application. The first problem is also the simplest: overuse. An over-reliance on any cinematic tool is going to have a negative effect, whether that's jump cuts or panning shots, snappy dialogue, narration, or even music as emotional grammar. Yes, some filmmakers can elevate these tools to trademarks, but think about how easy it is to pastiche these styles, to suck the soul right out of them. Temperance is a crucial but often undervalued tool for an artist, and even the most bombastic should learn to hold back a few punches. This is as true for CGI as anything else, and a good example can be found in both 2010's Alice in Wonderland and 2016's Jungle Book. Both films look like Windows 98 invited people over for a party and force-fed the guests ketamine, but the main problem is that the sheer quantity of CGI to build up the film world is instantly detaching. This is particularly true when CGI dominates but is forced to contrast with something real. Now, this distinction between real and artificial is tricky and probably a topic for another video, but for our purposes here, it comes down to a cohesion between the topic of the film, its depiction, and the results.
And then I hear George's from the background going, "Look at the moons! Look at the moons!" And everyone goes like this, because nobody knows where they are, the moons.
One common way to break down a film is to separate it into two categories: the diegetic and extra diegetic. The first refers to things that exist in the film world as a cohesive part of its logic and narrative. Extra diegetic elements refers to elements of the film as an overall product, but are not present in the interior world. A film score is typically extra diegetic by nature. Imagine, for example, Jaws' frustration if its presence was given away every time by a high-registered tuba solo. So whenever we look into the screen, everything that happens in the frame, within the border, is considered real. Filmmakers get a lot of leeway here, and though pedantic film fans may try and call out every time an action doesn't make scientific sense, the average viewer understands the contract. Yet when this sense of real is stratified into kinda real and real, it creates a dissonance, even more so when the dichotomy is much more stark. The problem is that when CGI is used badly, it becomes extra diegetic, announcing itself as technique, even while it claims to have narrative substance. There are ways around this. Take for example the so-so Tron Legacy from 2010. There's a film drenched in CGI. In fact, if you can get your hands on unedited footage, the whole movie is essentially about Garrett Hedlund, Olivia Wilde and Jeff Bridges trying to escape a felt lavender cage. But narratively, the incoherence between the actors and the world is explained in, like, the central premise of the movie. Even though this world is artificial, it is communicated to the audience as real. So even though I don't think they're better films, the use of CGI in Alice in Wonderland is, on some level, better than The Jungle Book. It is, after all, a fantasy, and in the most lucid sense, a world where the rules can be turned upside down. I know The Jungle Book features talking animals and prophecies and stuff, but so does the Bible.
The Bible, you've been talking about how it's your favorite book, and you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favorite Bible verses are, and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it, because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me.
What I'm saying is that The Jungle Book leans much harder on realism than the Wonderland films do. And when I say realism, I don't mean realistic. I mean Christopher Nolan's Batman series that wants to convey a sense that this could be realistic. It definitely isn't, and it's aware of this, but part of its appeal is it's meshing over the world we already know. So even though tigers can't talk, and if they could, they would definitely sound more like this.
What beastly luck.
Than this.
I challenge you to a dance-off. Hands off, no trash talk, no backwalk. On the black top, just me, you, that's all.
The fact is we have tigers, we have elephants, and we have wolves. This distinction between CGI and realistic films and fantasy is a good way to look at more recent films that more overtly lean on CGI. Moving away from Disney for a second. Oh no, wait. Totally staying with Disney for the foreseeable future.
We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause.
Let's look at two films from the Marvel canon. Black Panther, a pretty decent film but so overrated that it can only be measured in wheelbarrows of 1920s Deutschmarks, and Thor Ragnarok, which my autocorrect wants to change to Thor Anorak, which is just perfect. Black Panther drew some criticism for its weak action sequences and particularly its passable use of CGI in said sequences. The consensus seems to be that very talented and very clever director Ryan Coogler, known for poignant dramas like Fruitvale Station, found himself out of his depth. While this is probably true, it's also the case that Black Panther, more than other Marvel films, had a bit of an agenda. That is not a bad thing, but it just makes it more jarring when one half of a dialectical argument about a serious social issue suddenly turns into a lump of plasticine. The character of Black Panther is not a bouncy superhero. Springy, sure, but not a cartoon. His meaning is much more concrete, and so is his purpose, and consciously or subconsciously, we expect his physicality to match it. Now, Thor benefits from a series of things in this argument. He's a god and therefore has, godness on his side. His character is ripped right from Norse mythology, something that is nebulous enough in most people's mind as to be pretty flexible for use. And of all the current Marvel film adaptations, he's the most naturally resistant to the dark, gritty realism strain that is surely going to drag Warner Brothers and DC to the grave.
Something darker.
This gives a Thor film a lot of freedom, both in its world building and the actual building of the world. The CGI oversaturation isn't really an issue because this is though an amalgamation of a couple of different things, a capital F fantasy. But even in the action scenes, which range in quality, the CGI is never in conflict with the central tenets of the world. Helena is presented as almost like a liquid, and Thor eventually is the embodiment of lightning. Now, it's impossible to say whether these were clever workarounds for the technology's limitations, or narrative elements spun to the benefit of the VFX team, but my own theory would simply be that Thor Ragnarok under director Waititi's stewardship came together as a cohesive whole, and this meant the CGI worked for the movie, not just as part of it. This is my central point. Bad CGI can lead to a breakdown between the medium, the content, and the audience. When CGI doesn't just look bad, but feels bad, people aren't just reacting to an aesthetic, but to the movie as a whole. Audiences are willing to suspend their disbelief, but they want to believe in the substance of the film. Suspension of disbelief is used to explain how an audience understands that the film world they are watching may have different rules from the world they know. This is also true for CGI, but it only goes so far. Let's look again at Black Panther and how ridiculous this leap looks. And yet, Michael Jordan, in Space Jam, does not look ridiculous when his arm extends about 10 meters. Aesthetically, I don't like either of them, but it's Black Panther as a film that suffers most. There's a Spielberg quote about Hook where he says, "I didn't quite know what I was doing, and I tried to paint over my insecurity with production value. The more insecure I felt about it, the bigger and more colourful the sets became." The point is that CGI is essentially a really good thing. It's just often used because it's easier, or because it's seen as necessary for a big budget feature, or because insurance is probably cheaper on not real people. Spielberg clearly thought he overdid it on the sets for Hook, and it's because he felt insecure. So the question is, what the fuck was going on with Ready Player One?